Hey everyone, if you're joining me from your high school literature class today, I am so excited to have you here. Look, we're going to put the standard textbook definitions aside for just a little bit. In this explainer, we're exploring the dark, psychological origin story of a writer who completely changed how we experience fear. Of course, we're talking about Edgar Allan Poe, the absolute, undisputed god of horror. You see, Poe didn't just invent scary stories, he quite literally weaponized his own grief.
I mean, just listen to these words from his famous poem, Annabelle. It sounds like this beautiful, ultimate declaration of love, doesn't it? But, well, here's the twisted genius of Poe. He knew that beauty doesn't actually last. It fades, it rots, and when it's gone, it leaves this gaping, hollow space that you just cannot fill. As we'll see today, Poe's unique blend of beauty and decay, it always starts with the agonizing tragedy of lost love.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover The Shadow of Death, Orphaned by Tragedy, Rejecting the Sunny Mainstream, Crafting Beauty from Decay, and finally, The Blueprint of Modern Horror. Kicking things off with Part 1, The Shadow of Death.
To really get inside Poe's head, we kind of have to flip how we normally think about mortality. For most of us, right, death is this unwelcome intruder. But for Poe, death wasn't just a shadow following him around, it was a shadow he actively kept chasing. It was his lifelong, inescapable companion. And this constant, heavy proximity to death wasn't just, a streak of terrible luck. It was the raw emotional fuel that he'd eventually used to invent modern Gothic horror.
Which brings us to Part 2, Orphaned by Tragedy.
I gotta warn you, Poe's early life is just a relentless, brutal descent into personal tragedy. The pacing of this is honestly staggering. By age 1, his father abandons the family and then dies shortly after. By age 3, his mother dies of tuberculosis. He gets taken in by a foster family, but then in 1829, his beloved foster mother dies of, you guessed it, tuberculosis. 2 years after that, his biological brother dies of the exact same disease. I mean, what do you even do when the world outside wants sunshine and optimism, but your reality is literally chained in an attic of sickness and grief? This relentless pacing validated his incredibly bleak worldview from day one.
So after losing his birth parents, Poe was taken in by a wealthy merchant named John Allan. Let's just say they were a terrible match. John Allan offered conditional love. He wanted a respectable businessman who, romanced counting ledgers and balanced the books. Poe, on the flip side, was a broke poet. He craved real affection and just wanted to bleed words onto a page. It was this incredibly toxic, transactional relationship, and honestly, it pushed a teenage Poe right into gambling, debt, and ultimately, total rebellion.
Now the crucial point is what happens next. At the age of 18, which is right around the exact age many of you watching are right now, Poe decided to do the most dramatic thing possible to escape that suffocating, toxic home life. He enlisted in the United States Army under a completely fake name, Edgar A. Perry, and claimed he was 22. The guy just needed out.
Moving right along to Part 3, Rejecting the Sunny Mainstream.
After his time in the military, a completely failed attempt at West Point, and publishing a huge failure of a first book, Poe basically decided to wage a full-on literary rebellion. You have to remember, early 19th century American literature was aggressively optimistic. It was all about these sunny landscapes, noble farmers, heroic ideals, the whole shebang. Poe looked at that and basically went, yeah, okay, but what if that noble farmer brutally murdered his wife and buried her cold, dead body under the floorboards? He actively, forcefully rejected the sunny social norms of his era.
And he wasn't writing for cheap jump scares either. Poe's horror was deeply psychological. He focused on things like guilt, obsession, absolute madness, claustrophobia, and of course grief. He was basically holding up a mirror to the disturbing, twisted sides of the human psyche that polite 19th century society desperately tried to pretend didn't exist.
All right, Part 4, Crafting Beauty from Decay.
Amidst all this darkness, a sliver of light actually came into Poe's life. This was his cousin, Virginia Clemm, who became his ultimate anchor. But as we know, love couldn't cure his poverty. Personal and professional rejections just kept piling up. So to cope, Poe fell into this really toxic loop of alcohol, which led to intense self-sabotage. I mean, the man could write an absolute masterpiece in the morning and then completely destroy a major career opportunity by nightfall. The drinking blurred the edges of reality for him, opening his eyes even wider to the rotten side of humanity, which then fueled his darker, most brilliant stories. It was a perfect, devastating cycle.
And then, the ultimate tragedy struck again. Just imagine this horrifying, macabre moment.
Virginia is happily playing the piano. She suddenly coughs, and a bright drop of blood blooms right on her lips. Tuberculosis. The exact same disease that had already taken his mother, his foster mother, and his brother, had now come for his wife. Literally the only light he had left in the world.
Watching Virginia slowly fade away trapped Poe in this completely claustrophobic prison of powerlessness. He was terrified, and his pen basically absorbed all of that dread. It was during this exact, incredibly dark period that he wrote The Telltale Heart and The Pit and the Pendulum. If you think about it, the pounding, inescapable guilt in The Telltale Heart sounds exactly like a fevered heartbeat. It was echoing Virginia's fragile pulse right in his own ears.
And from this pain came his defining masterpiece. You know the word nevermore from his famous poem, The Raven? Well, it's not just some catchy refrain. It is Poe's ultimate Gothic trope. When Poe wrote about a grieving man visited by a raven that just keeps repeating that one word, he was actually writing about watching Virginia fade in the candlelight. It was his horrific realization that once she was gone, his happiness would never more return. It wasn't just a poem, it was a crushing prophecy of permanent loss.
Virginia passed away in January of 1847, and it created the final irreparable break in Poe's psyche. He'd always courted death, sure, but when Virginia died, it was as if he finally saw death actually standing in the room looking back at him. Not with cold indifference, mind you, but with a warm, almost pitying smile, sort of like saying, "You knew I was going to come." Actually, scratch that, it was exactly like that. After this moment, Poe fell into a profound darkness from which he would literally never, ever recover.
Which brings us to our final section, the blueprint of modern horror.
Let's take a look at the deeply bizarre end of his life. 40. Just 40 years old. That is how old Poe was when he died in 1849. And his death? It's still an unsolved mystery today. He was found wandering completely deliriously in a random park in Baltimore, wearing some other man's clothes. To this day, nobody knows exactly what happened. There were no obvious signs of alcohol poisoning or an attack. 4 days later, in the hospital, he opened his eyes, softly whispered for the Lord to help his poor soul, and died. But here's the thing. While his physical body passed on, his words absolutely refused to die. Edgar Allan Poe provided the very blueprint for modern horror. He basically invented detective fiction, and he laid the absolute foundation for psychological thrillers. His work influenced everyone from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle all the way to the modern filmmakers we watch today. Why? Because he did the unthinkable. He dragged horror out of the spooky graveyards, and he planted it firmly, terrifyingly inside the human mind.
So I want to leave you all with this final, provocative question. Is death the opposite of life, or the ultimate proof it existed? You see, Poe didn't just show us horror. He showed us the tragic beauty inside that horror. He taught us that the only reason death hurts so incredibly much is because life and love felt so sweet in the first place. He stared straight into the tragedy of the human condition and crafted it into brilliant art that will outlive us all. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer to explore the dark, incredible mind of Edgar Allan Poe. Keep questioning, keep analyzing, and I'll see you next time.